Hello, BookTube. Well, as I mentioned in that earlier video, while I was out and about today and while mail was accumulating in the foyer, uh, I've had a lot of good book discoveries, and none of them were at the Brattle Bookshop. I go everywhere where there are books in Boston. And I found a stack of them, as much as a muscular teenager could carry. uh, and again, I want to show you some of them because a lot of them, half the stack was for you. So I don't want to spoil the surprise, but the other half was for me. And I want to show you those and tell you a little about them because it was a fairly good day. First of all, best find, for a paperback anyway, is this. It's called Victorian Miniature by Owen Chadwick, the great medievalist and religious historian from the early part of the last century. I had a paperback of this. It wasn't this old Canto reprint line. I forget what it was, but it was in terrible shape. It was horrible flyaway paper, and the spine was all gone. This thing isn't much better. I'd ideally like a hardcover of this book, but it's so fantastic that it's going to be so wonderful to read it again. It's his study of one little, as the title suggests, one little miniature fracas in a village in early Victorian Norwich, where the two poles of power in any village, in any provincial village at the time, was the squire who held the manor house and the vicar who held the vicarage. And this is he finds a village that had where the squire and the vicar both left copious diaries and wrote lots of letters. So he was actually able to document the thing, even down to dialogue. So this is all true, but he is such a fantastic writer, so wry, so reserved, and yet so funny, that it actually does. I mean, the standard line of criticism when this first came out, like 60 years ago, was that it read like a Trollope novel. And I'm actually reading, right now I'm reading The Claverlings by Anthony Trollope, in which there is antagonism between the squire and the vicar. It's a theme, to say the least, that runs through a lot of Trollope. And the praise of it at the time in the TLS and elsewhere saying that was right, but in a way it's, heretical as this sounds, better than Trollope because it's all true and utterly fascinating. So I look forward to reading this again. I don't think this paperback will last more than one reading. And actually I was reading it on the bus, and I came across a great line, the line that really sums up the whole book. Every squire worth his salt was the master of his parish, and he could not be the master of his parish unless he was also the master of its vicar. Classic. And then, talking about classic, here's this. Edward O. Wilson's The Diversity of Life. This is I've had this paperback a million times, and I always end up sending it to people. It's got color photographs and also drawings all throughout, and it is a study of evolution. It's basically a big overview, a big, generous, and beautifully written overview of evolution, of the evolution of life on Earth. I always end up giving it to people because a lot of people, especially who are starting to study the subject, will always tell me, "Oh God, Ernst Mayr and especially Charles Darwin are just a little much to take. Is there a good one-volume, accessible layman's approach to the subject?" And this is it. So I was happy to find it, but it's one of those cases where I don't have a recipient in mind, but I don't think I'll be holding on to this long. And then I will be holding on to the next one for a long time, no matter what my past history shows. It's this. It's Robert K. Massey's great biography of Catherine the Great, which some of you have probably seen on Olive's channel, a book Olive. She's a big fan of his, and so am I. And I got an unbound galley of this, and I got a galley of this, and I got a finished copy of this, and I got a paperback of this. The whole life cycle of the book I got free in the mail over years. And yet, where's my copy? No idea. No idea at all. So I found this basically for free. It was in a box for, like, take anything for 10 cents. And I got it because I want to reread him. And I also, I think I mentioned in an earlier video, I'm planning a sort of Russian Palooza thing for 2017. But not only that, I got it because I dang well want to keep it this time. I don't know where my copies keep going, but I'm confident this will be the last one. And then there's this. I have a paperback of this. It's The Reckoning by Charles Nicholl. I have a paperback, but I really wanted a hardcover because my paperback's falling apart. I go to it so often. And it is thrilling. Absolutely thrilling. Some of you may know the story of how the playwright Christopher Marlowe died. The common tagline is that he was stabbed to death while quarreling over the bill at the reckoning at a tavern. A drunken tavern brawl is what it's usually called. And Nichol doesn't believe that, and he digs into it, and he digs into the biographies of the men who were in the room with Marlowe at the time, and it is investigative historical writing at its absolute finest. It's just rock solid and thrilling throughout. And of course, the truth turns out to be so much more complicated than a drunken tavern brawl. The men had been together all day. They weren't drunk when it happened. They'd had food served. They'd been talking quietly. They hadn't been getting more and more rowdy. And the three men in the room all have shady past, completely shady past, and pasts that are not friendly to Christopher Marlowe. By the time you're done with the book, you're 99% willing to agree with Nichol's implied conclusion that it was an execution and that it was carefully planned as such. But one way or another, whether you agree with it or not, this book perfectly encapsulates what I'm thinking when I tell people that reading history is actually, once you get into the habit of doing it, far more gripping than any fiction could be. And this is a perfect example of why that is. And then the last one is another example of something that we're seeing on this channel. We saw one before, and here's another one. These old Scribner Classic illustrated editions of classic books with illustrations by N.C. Wyeth. This is Robinson Crusoe, which I haven't read in forever. And the pictures are just beautiful. And they're all throughout. It's just... let me get you another one here. Yeah, there's the craft to bring them to safety. And every single one of them I want. Every single one of them I had once upon a time. So when I find one, this was 10 cents too. When I find one, I grab it, especially when there's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's not broken. It's not sun damaged. So let me pile them up for you here. This was the other half of my book day. In addition to the mail, it was a very good book day. So there you go. I'll stop for now. Thank you, BookTube.